Welcome to the show, my friend. How are you today?
Doing well. Yourself?
Doing well. Okay, so you guys may not know this, but Marissa is my neighbor. So we're actually like sitting pretty much on top of each other, sharing a microphone.
Yeah.
So just have that visual as you guys are listening to this.
And I'm lucky enough from my end to actually see it.
Yeah.
Good times, yes. And then also we're moving, and so there are boxes everywhere, which is also fun. So
just adding to this whole experience.
Right? All right, Marissa. So we always like to start off our show when we have our guests is, what are you loving right now?
Ooh, that is a good question. One of the things that I've been really into lately is magnesium powder. So I've been adding it to my water because I'm also just like not a huge water drinker. Like I love water. I just kind of forget about it. And so having something that's kind of flavored but like really clean has been really helpful for me to like up my water intake. And also magnesium is super great for your muscles, if you have like aches and pains and stuff. And then it's also amazing for stress. So like from my Lyme disease, suffering from like a lot of anxiety, it's been amazing because it's like some crazy statistic, like 80% at least of Americans do not get their recommended amount of magnesium each day. So it's just like a super easy way. So I just use that Calm brand. I get it from Natural Grocers. It's really easy, cheap. Yeah. And that's kind of what I've been into.
So how did you go about dosing for the, because I have a story about misreading the label on that.
Yeah, that is a very important note because you do not want to shit your pants. Be very, very mindful. Like you have to like incrementally increase. So I'm super sensitive and I was like, I'm not going to be home. Like I do not want to risk any sort of situation. And so I think I started off with a third of their dosage and kind of had that for a few days, didn't feel anything, and then like was up to a half and kind of just worked my way up from there. And I don't even think I'm still at a full dosage, and it's been a couple weeks, but it's better than nothing.
So when I looked at it and read it the first time, I didn't really read the directions. I just saw a serving size of 2 teaspoons, and I misread that as 2 tablespoons.
That'll do it.
So I took that the night before a run and was like shitting my pants before the run. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to go because this is like really, really bad. Yeah. So note of caution, if you start off with Natural Calm, do not overdose because you will have disaster pants big time.
Read the P's and the B's. Do not mix that. Yeah, that would be gritty.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Get it out of that.
That would be terrible before a race day too. Or I guess just a run in general.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because it was, like a group run and everything. And there were no bathrooms along the way. So I was like, oh, man, this might not happen.
Only bushes. Only bushes.
Yeah. And then you have to use a sock. And those socks are expensive. Like you don't want to have like, they're like $20 a pair. So it's $10 worth of toilet paper right there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Sad day.
Now, what about sleep? Did you find that it helped improve your sleep?
Yeah, I'm a great sleeper. I'll just be like completely, like I do wake up during the night sometimes, and I haven't noticed, I know that it is really good for that, but also since I'm not taking a full dosage, I don't know if that's impacted that, but I also do take CBD oil. And so I do sleep really well, but I wonder if I were to not take CBD oil, if the magnesium would help, because I used to have a spray that I would use in college, like, after a shower, put it on your achy joints or whatever. And that stuff knocked me out. I slept so incredibly well. Yeah, I don't remember the brand. It was just some random local thing. But yeah, it definitely does help with sleep. I just haven't noticed it as much with the Natural Calm. But yeah, definitely another benefit for sure.
Interesting.
I tried the spray magnesium once, like right after shaving, and it made my legs burn so bad.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like just that one incident, and it was like the first time that I used it, and it was like, yeah, and it was pretty much like putting icy hot on like freshly shaven legs where you're just like, oh my gosh, they're freaking burning off.
Ow. That sounds miserable.
It was not fun.
I've put that magnesium spray. I've just sprayed it on my skin, and I feel like it makes my skin tingle. So I can only imagine if it's like fresh shaven leg hairs, you know?
Yeah, right.
Ow.
So magnesium obviously comes with its risk. You can burn your skin or you'll shit your pants. But if you don't do either of those things, it's awesome for you.
It has its benefits, but you have to use it as directed by your functional medicine or nutritional therapy practitioner.
Oh, so Marissa, I guess why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners? So in our intro, we did introduce you and tell a little bit of your background, but why don't you tell us like kind of what you do and being a health coach and everything? And you can actually like hold the microphone.
So I am a health coach. I got my certification. I graduated from the Health Coach Institute, and I got that about 7-8 months ago, so relatively new, but I've always like been super into health. I graduated from college with a degree in health communication, so I've always just been super passionate about the science, but then also explaining that in a way, sharing that knowledge with people in just a super easy way, not saying, here's this 90-page research article that you don't care about. How can I share that in a way that really gives people like accountable steps? So health coaching was a really natural fit for me. And then also having Lyme disease really kind of solidified just wanting to be in the health profession, because there's just so much misinformation. Everybody's different. We're so bio-individualistic, and I think it's just such a necessary job that we all do, to really focus on the individual, because it's so hard to do that for doctors, based on like what the healthcare system is set up as. That's just, they just aren't able to provide the kind of care that we do. And I'm such a one-on-one person that after really struggling with finding people to help with Lyme disease, you get so much misinformation, so many misdiagnoses, that I was like, I just really want to be that person, that's gone through this, that can guide people in the right direction. So yeah, it's been really nice to couple that with my own healing journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's awesome. And a lot of practitioners in the industry, when you like listen to their podcast or you just have conversations with them and you become familiar with their work and who they are, if they have personal stories, I think that just makes their practice and like the care that they're giving to their clients so much more involved, because they've actually been there,
Yeah, it's not just coming from a textbook, it's like we've all in this industry, I feel like it's very hard to be in, doctors are one thing, but like kind of this functional medicine world, I feel like it's very rare for people to be in it if they haven't had any sort of experience and personal story, at least with the people that I've interacted, everyone's had a pretty life-changing or just, a mindset around health, or is known family, friends, personal experiences, because it's hard to provide that level of intimate care if you don't really understand at least some part of what that person's going through, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. So I think that's awesome. I think it's really cool that you got into this to help people.
Yeah, it's been pretty fulfilling. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to do. I was talking about this with Casey. It's so nice to receive it. I mean, we're going to talk about money in a bit, but just getting a check for doing stuff that you love and for really being able to help people has blown my mind. It's like I grew up in Silicon Valley. Like people worked until their fingers fell off and they were miserable, like waiting for the end of the week. And it's just so nice to finally find, stuff that I love doing, that it doesn't feel like work, and it's just amazing when you make that shift, how much can open up for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's, I would love to really dive deep into your Lyme, because that's, an interest of mine, just learning about like your story and all that kind of stuff, your experience, but definitely that's a whole nother show in and of itself for another day.
Yeah, that was a very long process.
But yeah, we would love to have you back on to talk about that, but definitely today, we really want to talk about like that money mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and really like making that shift from, you typically go to like a 9-to-5 job or whatever, and you work and you make your paycheck, right? And then you get your deposit every couple weeks, and like that's how you make money. And so it's interesting when you switch over to more of like an entrepreneurial type business, right? Where you're working for yourself, making your own hours, and you're having to work for that money. But then we get into that sticky situation that a lot of people are talking about, where you don't want to ask for that money, right? Because you're serving people and you're helping them, and you just want to do them a service and do them good. But at the end of the day, like, that's still a service that you have to get paid for.
Exactly. And I feel like maybe it's just this industry, like, right? It draws nurturing people, right? It draws givers, it draws healers. And I know in my personal experience, like, I love helping people. That's what I love. I love waking up in the morning and knowing that, like, I'm going to change somebody's life today, or make something easier, more or whatever it is. And I'm such a people pleaser. I just did like an Instagram post about this a while ago. It's a crippling thing for me that I have been really trying to work with. And I think it's a really prevalent issue with people in this industry specifically, is that we just want to help and give and give and give. And what our issue is working on the receiving. We're providing so much value, but how can we shift to make ourselves more open to the receiving? How are we able to, be aware of this content that we're providing and these services that we're providing, and say, okay, like, this is really helping this person. I need to be okay with getting compensated for my work, but not coming from a place of I'm doing this to get compensated. And it's a really fine line to walk, I think, especially when you're starting out your business.
Mm-hmm. What kind of like tips or like mindsets activities, I guess, so to speak, have you really done to like put yourself in that kind of thought process?
Yeah, I think to answer that, I kind of have to go back a bit to really how I view money, and I think that there's such a like misinterpretation of what money is, or there's so many attributes that people just put on money. But at the end of the day, money is neutral, right? Like, money is money. Money does not equal fulfillment. Money does not equal any of this stuff, because you're always going to want more. You can think that it does, but you'll make a bunch of money and then you're like, okay, what's next? And so I think it's really important to backtrack a bit to, what are you assigning to money? And what I tell people, actually I was just talking about this today because of that person who won the lotto, and they're like, this is going to change somebody's life, and this and that, and it really could. And I mean, that's a ridiculous amount of money.
Was that only in Colorado?
That was, one
everywhere?
In South Carolina.
Okay, so it was everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't remember, it's like some crazy amounts.
I think it was like 1.6 billion.
See, and like that amount of money, but right, that is not going to make that person fulfilled ultimately. Like, it might feel really great at the beginning to have that amount of money in your bank account, but you're always going to want more. And so really, what money to me is energy, and money is a magnifier. So if you're a really great person, having more money will probably make you an even greater person, because you will be able to share and give and whatever you want to do with that in a positive way. Versus if you're irresponsible with your money, like, having more money is not going to make you more responsible with money. And so a lot for me of getting over my entrepreneurial blocks, if you will, was seeing, okay, what do our money is? And growing up in this entrepreneurial family, like, I had one of my brothers retired at 22, this carpet cleaning business. And then of course, a couple years later, he was like, I'm super bored. I want to go back to work. I'm not fulfilled with this lifestyle. Like, my mom would take money out of my savings when I had jobs growing up to pay our rent. And so I had like a very warped perception of what money was, and having it like stay in my account just to have it leave, like, this money and then it just goes. And I think with entrepreneurs, like, especially when you're starting your business, you work so hard to like get that first client, and you're like, okay, now it's all gone because I have to pay my bills. I have to put it into this, my rent, my whatever. And so I guess going back to what you're saying is, it really is about understanding like what money means to you, and having a really healthy like, do not be afraid to look at your bank account, like, because what's that expression? Like, what? So if you are ignoring that, what your bank account levels are at, where your bills are at, that isn't going to go away. It's not like, well, I'm going to ignore this so Chase won't send me my monthly bill. It's not going to happen. And one of the exercises that I've started doing recently, because I was like, well, if I just don't look at this medical bill or whatever, like they're not going to charge me, is that I would spend 10 minutes every day just looking at my bank account, going through everything and saying, here's where I'm at. Like, I don't want to hide from this anymore. I want to have a very clear understanding of where my money's at so that I know where I want to go. And the second step is really then to completely kind of ignore that and focus on value. So what value can you provide? And one of the exercises that I like to do is, what content solves my own problems? Because, we come from such a personal place in this industry, like we said. So it's like, what helps us? And that helps me, make this content that I know will help my target market, things like that. And when I know that I'm creating valuable content, the money comes. It's not so much about like, I need this $250, this fill in the blank, whatever. It's just, how can I keep providing value? Because if you're not putting yourself out there, like, how do you expect people to pay you if they don't even know what you're doing? You can't just say, why aren't these people, like all these other people have, amazing clients and they have speaking gigs and they have this and that. Well, they're probably doing stuff to let people know that they're available to do that. They're not just sitting at home thinking about how much money they wish that they were making. So kind of, yeah.
So, question for you. Did you have any, I guess, like resources? Did you listen to any podcasts or read any books to, kind of come up with these? Or was it just like realizations that you had?
Yeah, kind of a mix of both. I love Gary Vee. Gary Vee, Tony Robbins, like that whole group of just badass men. And Angie Lee, who does... she is a coach for health coaches. So she does a lot of really great content about some money stuff, but also really just like how to be comfortable, speaking, how to be comfortable selling, and really just how to be comfortable knowing that you are providing value. Because for me, like being so insecure, I was like, I need to just start becoming really comfortable with what I'm providing and knowing that this is actually useful stuff, stop downplaying myself. And then, so yeah, like mindset books and, I think there's a book called Mindset, and it talks about, kind of the healthcare field, but it will talk about the different types of mindset and how that is in like CEOs and how you can see like different successful people like across a whole scale and what their mindsets are like. And that kind of helped me figure out where I was on that scale and where I wanted to be. And then a lot of it was really just watching my family. It's like my dad was a serial entrepreneur. Like he literally to this day has, and every time we talk, he's like, oh, now I'm doing this and now I'm in LEDs and now I'm selling business. And like, he just loves to learn. And it's like, that's really great. But, then it's like my mom has her own bookkeeping company. And it was a lot of it was looking at how much she, has kind of changed over the years since growing her business, how she's become more comfortable raising her rates. And that's one of the things I really suggest is to look at people who live how you want to live, model them, look at how they think, look at how they talk, because they're laying it out for you, in that industry. Don't just look at the big guys. I mean, Gary Vee and Tony Robbins have amazing stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's so important, as a health coach, like I look at the top health coaches, what are they doing? Because they're literally, it's a roadmap for your own success on how to, at least having a goal of how you want to talk about, giving you a template of how to talk about your services and what you offer. So that's definitely one thing I would suggest, just spend a ton of time on like Instagram, seeing what people in your community do, what type of stuff they talk about, what resonates with their audiences most. And that's been really helpful for me to kind of just get a better gauge.
Mm-hmm. What about, do you have any like business resources? Like, so beyond like the mindset piece of it and kind of like, obviously the stellar people to follow in the industry, like Gary Vee and Tony Robbins. But what about like business stuff? Like, did you do any, programs, or like how are you like managing your money? Like how do you think about, okay, because I know like even the other day Casey and I listened to this podcast, and it's like, who was that, Casey? I forget, but she was talking about how like if you have 10 clients, okay, so like this quarter, focus on increasing your business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, she was talking about like, you know, focus on increasing your client base by 1%, which is one person when you break it down. You know, stuff like that. Did anything really like stand out to you in your business to help you, you know, develop and grow and kind of make the switches in terms of that?
Yeah, that was, first of all, it was a really good podcast. I listened to that as well, and it was awesome. That's a really hard question. I think I kind of had a decent foundation in terms of business because of the health coach institute that I went through. So that's actually one of the reasons that I chose them, was because they had 4 different pillars. And so, you know, you had like your nutrition, and then you had your coaching, and then had to design a program, whatever. And the 4th is business. And so all about how to sell yourself, like scripts. And obviously, you know, I was like, I don't align with the cheesy things that are written in these, but it was a good foundation. And so for me, at least, in coming from that schooling, was really helpful for me to see, okay, like they talk about breaking it down as well. You know, how do you, if you want to make X amount of money, you know, and you're comfortable doing X amount, like how many clients do you need? And then breaking that down into, okay, this means I need to have this many talks, or have this many 90-day programs, this many 21-day programs, things like that. And I think for me, just making it more tangible and service based really helped me not feel so overwhelmed thinking about the money side, because I was like, I'm just starting out. Like, I think taking some of the pressure off of me, but not taking away the hunger, if that makes sense. You know, I was like, I am still super driven, but I don't want to be so intense, so salesy. You know, it's like, let me just focus on the value, and then share. You know, like I know I have a set number of calls I need to make, emails, whatever, but getting the value part really figured out first made that easier for me in a way, because I knew what I was comfortable with what I was providing, versus other times when I've tried to sell things or myself, and I'm like, I'm really not confident at all in this, so I don't know why you would want to buy. I'm not going to convince you on that. And so I know that that's not an exactly a resource, but that's, I guess, how I went about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The podcast that you recommended, so Marissa actually recommended the Angie Lee podcast, and there are some amazing business tips on that podcast. If you guys want to go check her out, like, don't listen to her when you have the kids in the car, because she has a potty mouth, but she has amazing content as well.
Yeah, those are always good resources.
Yeah.
Marissa, I'm trying to think of how I want to ask this. So something that, you know, and Megan and I, we can talk about this some more too. Like, we've gotten a lot more open about talking about money, and, you know, like how much our commission checks are, and, you know, what our goals are in terms of, okay, this is how much I want to make. And I feel like it's something that, you know, it's been a shift just in the past couple of months, because I mean, for the longest time, it was always like, oh, you know, you never ask somebody what they make or anything like that. And it's been really interesting just in my own personal life, how much it's opened up, you know, like where I actually feel comfortable telling some of my best friends when I was in Dallas this past weekend, how much I'm making with Beauty Counter. And so have you noticed that at all? Like, just having those conversations about money, that like when you're more comfortable with it, that you kind of just like talk about it more?
Yeah, that is, and that's so true, because I think as society, we've just like, we put such an importance on money, and then we don't want to talk about it. You know, it's like this such a conflicting views that we have. And I've totally noticed the same thing, that when I'm like, yeah, this is what I charge for a program, and being really confident, and like, and I know that that's a very good value, has really helped me for saying, you know, I've made, like you said, this amount this month, and my plans are for this. And it definitely is dependent who you're talking, of course, being mindful of the audience, because some people that just really rubs them the wrong way. And then I think just remembering that, like not everybody's in the place that we're at, being as comfortable as we talk about money, but having those conversations and, making people think about, okay, this is something that people talk about or that we should be talking about, kind of, I think just helps get a sense, if you're talking to people in your industry, it helps get a sense of where other people are at, but also, to your clients as well, to be so upfront, like with Beauty Counter, to say, yeah, I make this amount. Like if somebody is looking for a business opportunity, like that is such a selling point to say, here, I'm being super transparent with you. And also if they're not looking for a business opportunity and they're just looking to buy that product or your service or whatever it is, the fact that you're so open saying that, and it's not, let me just, sell, tuck in the price at the end. It don't, like nobody wants that. And yeah, I definitely target market talking about money. When you're confident talking about money, you will make that sale a lot easier because they know that you're not just trying to trick them into paying some amount of fee that they don't see as reasonable. You're like, look, here is the price, here's what I'm willing, what I'm able to offer you, here is the value, here are the problems that I'm going to solve for you. Take yourself out of the equation. This is about the client. This is like them taking out non-toxic skincare from their routine, helping them be more accountable to losing weight. Like people are willing to pay so much money for that. And it's possible for you too. It's getting out of that mindset of, well, that's for those coaches, that's for consultants, that's for all of these other people, when they had to start somewhere too. And so it's like the sooner that you can get comfortable with what you are offering and be really proud of the value that you provide, I think is definitely the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the other thing is we spend so much time like creating content and programs and working with our clients and following up and sending out emails and all of this stuff. And at the end of the day, like we've got set pricing on our consultations, on our follow-ups, on our phone calls, on our lab testing, on our supplements, on our whatever it might be. And sometimes it's really hard to be like, yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I think, you need. I know it's a little pricey, so maybe we can like cut this, out here, maybe this out here, or whatever it might be. But I mean, you've got to think about the end of the day, like one, the education and the training and the time spent and everything that you've gone through, the value that you're putting into that, to really just take a step back and, say, okay, this is my worth. And like, this is definitely, what, like just being comfortable with your prices and all that kind of stuff. But the other thing too is like also knowing when you try to like cut corners for cost for people that you're just like you're giving them like the short end of the stick, so to speak, Like if there was like a certain, I don't know, like skincare regimen or like certain functional lab testing or whatever. And you're like, well, let's, if we can just do these couple of things versus like the whole package, but like the whole package is what is what they need. That's going to, make their skin clear or get them feeling better or whatever it might be, so it's about getting comfortable, I guess, with that.
Yeah. And I think also realizing where they're coming from, so like as a coach, if I face objections when I'm telling people like, look, I don't think the 21-day program, like you said, right? I don't think the 21-day program is really what you need. You need more accountability. The 90-day program will really get you the results that you want. It's X number of dollars. And if, getting objections, it's like, okay, well, so you're saying that, you need to talk to your husband, right? That's one that women say all the time. I need to talk to my husband before talking about this. Okay, well, what do you think your husband will say? Like, and you work through this until they realize like, yeah, my husband doesn't want me to be unhealthy. He doesn't want me to be uncomfortable in my own skin, things like that. And so it's, trying to figure out too, like, is this an excuse on their part? What is it that they have like ingrained themselves to believe, that's contributed to them not being comfortable with the price, and how can you kind of help them work through that? And yeah, like that's free coaching, but it's understanding why they may be uneasy. And also the other point that I wanted to say was when something's too cheap, it loses value. If you see a $3 shampoo, there is no way that I'm going to believe that that's good for me, And so it's also realizing that, yeah, if I offer this 90-day program for $350, you'll get some people, but you won't get, at least in my experience, like I would not get the people who are super dedicated to that work because they haven't put in like enough money to see the value or enough money to be super dedicated. And so it's like payment plans exist, if it is a lot of money, but they want those results, like there's always a way to make that work, but don't undersell your value because people are going to think that what you're providing isn't valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It just looks sketchy. And so that's just what I wanted to add was don't project your own money beliefs. When I started, I was like, I wouldn't pay, $2,000 for this program. And I was like, okay, if I wouldn't pay that, there's no way that I can sell that. So what's a price point that I'm comfortable with? Even if other coaches offering the exact same program are offering twice as much, I won't make any sales if I'm at that price point. So finding a price point that shows the value, something that you're comfortable with. And really, if you're just starting out, what I suggest is telling people that and saying, hey, look, like I'm kind of new. I've seen your Facebook post. I know that you're trying to lose weight. You're trying to work on your vegetarian diet, whatever it may be. And since I'm starting out, I'll knock $150 off the price. So it's still, they know that they're getting a deal. And what I tell people is, hey, all I really want at the end is a testimonial. And if you want to tell your friends, like, that's great. And then you both kind of benefit. And then you just phase that out, I think, as you keep going.
Mm-hmm. Now,
something I want, I just
go ahead? Yes, go.
Yeah. Because something that I learned a long time ago when I was first starting out my chemical peel business, so I would always discount my services. And I was like, oh, people are not going to pay $100. So when it came time to check out, I would always get like really nervous. And I'd be like, oh, it's normally $100, but for you, it's only 80 or whatever. And I was listening to, it was Derek Halpern, and he was talking about like why you should never discount your services, because people will always, especially if it's like, something where you're having people, it's a repeat business. Yeah. So if it's a repeat business, like if this is just a one-time program, then yeah, absolutely. But if it's a repeat like customer or, like coming in every month for a treatment, whatever, you don't want to discount because people will never value you at that higher price point, especially if you discount it that first time. So if you're trying to get those customers, you give them a freebie with that first service. So you say, oh, you know what, normally, like with this first service, I will give, like an additional hand treatment, or you'll get a lip gloss or something like that, where they're getting something in addition, but you're not devaluing yourself and your service. But this is, again, for things where it's repeat client.
Mm-hmm.
Really good point.
That's a really good one. But what I was going to say was kind of jumping to a different topic, because earlier she mentioned like just, I guess, watching your parents and seeing kind of how they've developed their entrepreneurness. And then the other thing was like checking your bank account every day for like 10 minutes just to see like what your money's doing. So managing money, like what does that look like? Because I know for me until like last year, there was like really nothing with managing money. And then I actually started keeping like an Excel spreadsheet of like what my money's doing every single weekend. So like every Saturday, I basically just input like what what all my bank accounts look like, what my credit cards look like, what my investment accounts, look like, 401k, that kind of stuff. And I just watch my money like fluctuate back and forth. But I have like a sheet where it's like everything that's coming in, right? Like your revenues, reoccurring costs, all that kind of stuff. So every Saturday I just sit down and I input all that information. I watch my money move around. Kind of just touching on that subject, like what are good ways for people to manage their money, especially when they're just starting out and they're an entrepreneur, right? Like we don't have anything fancy, we don't have a whole lot of clients yet to really have like a big fancy service that we pay for every single month, at least, not there yet.
Yeah,
so
yeah. That's a really good question. And I have, an interesting answer, I think. So one of the questions that I asked myself when I was, and I forget where I heard this, but when I was first, really like, okay, I need to get my money under control. I no longer have a steady income that I know I get paid every 2 weeks. I'm not in corporate America anymore. And what I asked myself was, if I was dating money, what would that look like? And I was just had this absurd image in my brain of like money knocking at my door and me being like, I'm not home, like I'm not going to answer this. I'm hiding under my couch. I'm not going out to dinner. Like, just, I would never get a second date with money, really. And I was just like, it would just be an awful, awful experience. And so just kind of, I think, thinking of it in such an absurd way, it kind of made me aware of just how much, like I said before, how much I was just completely avoiding any sort of check-in with my money. And I like it, going back to what you said with my family, like I grew up always knowing like you work really hard for your money, it comes in and then it goes right back out. And it was really hard for me to think about holding on. Like I was good at saving, when I had a corporate job, but once you have your own business, expenses come up. And if you're not getting a regular income, you're just like, wow, it just keeps leaving and leaving and leaving and leaving. And I'm not getting nearly as much back in. And so one of the things that I really suggest for a first-time business owner or whatever, if you're growing a business, is to really streamline and kind of understand what is it that you need right now. There is so much, technology and software and programs, and everybody's trying to sell you on Facebook ads and this and that and the other. And honestly, it's not necessary. And it's like you can have the least fancy site in the world, but if you're, a capable coach, it doesn't matter. And it goes both ways, right? Like I would see so many people in my coaching class who focused months, literally, like we graduated in February, and June, July, August, still hadn't even focused on their coaching because it was like, my website's not perfect, my business cards aren't I don't have the right brochures, whatever it is. And it's like, all of that stuff's great, but if you have this ridiculously expensive, elaborate site and your coaching is not great, it doesn't matter. And so I really just kind of streamlined, okay, I know I need a website that has X, Y, and Z. And I'm really lucky because my boyfriend's a web designer, so I didn't have to spend money on that. I honestly couldn't even tell you what a site goes for. If you guys need a website, I got you. But I had him just like have this really basic site for me. I know Angie Lee, speaking of her, she really recommends Kajabi, which I've heard is great. If you're starting a business, they like have your templates and websites, and it's really reasonable a month. And so it's just finding what works for you. A lot of stuff can be free. Like I use the free version of Evernote to write all of my blogs and do all of my content. And it's, I don't need all the bells and whistles of things. And so don't get ahead of yourself, hone in on your service and see what are like the 3 things that you really need to look like you have a professional business. Because I think if you don't have a website, you also don't really look like you're taking it seriously. If you still have some, like mine would be like marissawoodman.weebly.com. whatever. Like if you're not even paying like the $45 to have your own domain, it also doesn't look like you're taking it seriously. So what I would say is just do, the baseline to show that you care, and then give yourself some time to let your business grow a bit, and then invest in coaches. I think that's something that is really, really scary for people because they're expensive, to get a good business coach, to get a good life coach, whatever it is. And if you think about it, okay, if you're paying them what do they run for? Like a grand, let's say. But if that coach is helping, you're spending $1,000 and then you get, 10 grand back, like whatever it is, it's so important to make those leaps in the correct areas. Don't spend, if you don't even have content and you're spending $1,000 on Facebook ads, why would you do that? And so hone in, don't compare yourself to people who are, years ahead of you in their business and all the things that they have. Just remember, like business cards, I don't even think are entirely necessary if a lot of the stuff that you do is online. Just realizing where you can hone back some of the fluff, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was good. Just to bring it in, I think a lot of people get overwhelmed with stuff too.
Oh yeah. I mean, how many people, like from our class, like I can't, I can't even count that high. It's like, oh my gosh, both of us included, Megan. We're like, we need to get our websites up before we can like start doing stuff. And it was kind of like just hiding behind that before we launched in. So something that it was kind of cool. I just listened to this podcast. I don't know if you guys listened to Amy Porterfield at all, but she just had this really great episode with a chick named Amber Duggar, and she is a cash flow expert. That was hard to say. Yeah, right. So she talks all about this program where it's profit first. And she actually has this like profitability spreadsheet where you can input things, but basically like you have all these buckets. So you can use this website called YNAB. You need a budget. And what you do is you have like all of these folders or like envelopes for your money. So you put one into, like 20% for your taxes. And just every time that you get paid, you're like, okay, let me put this into the calculator. I'm going to put X amount of dollars into my tax fund, X amount into my profitability, and then X amount into my business expenses. So now okay, I have $1,000 to put back into my business, but I've paid myself and I've saved for my taxes. We'll definitely link up to that because it was a really good episode.
Okay. Yeah. And that's like a software program that you mentioned?
I think it's kind of like mint.com. Like you input everything into the cloud, but the way that I understood it is that you can actually, so like with Mint, it's just kind of like what's happened in the past that you can't really do any kind of like future projections. And I think with You Need a Budget that you can do that if I understand it correctly. Because I used to use mint.com all the time. Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of how they explained. It was different.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it was a really, really good episode.
We'll link it up for sure.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what to say next.
Casey.
That was like I'll edit all this out, but
okay.
That was my grand thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds cool. It's interesting to learn about resources like that,
Mm-hmm.
Definitely just through podcasts, through friends, through other health coaches. I mean, that's why we're all here, right? And that's especially why we're doing this podcast, is just to give each other resources and everybody else out there just good resources and tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff that's worked for us.
Mm-hmm. Marissa, if you had one place for people to get started, or like one tip where if you have somebody that is just like sitting in tons of credit card debt, doesn't want to look at, they're like hiding under the couch from their Tinder date, like, I mean, not in like a scary way, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Right. What advice would you give that person? Like, where would you tell them to start?
You might have to edit this out because I have to think for a second. That's a really, really good question. If I had a ton of credit card debt, honestly, I mean, I do actually have a ton of credit card debt, so I really relate to this. And I know this kind of contradicts what we talked about, but I think that it's kind of almost important to forget about that for a second, not forever. Like, like I said, you want to check in regularly, things like that. But it can be so heavy that that's like becomes just a roadblock into any sort of action. And so, I mean, as a health coach, I would think about, okay, I have a ton of debt. Let me think about like these very actionable steps that I can do to make so I can make more content, I can make more sales, okay, let me figure out what are the things I can do that can bring revenue through my door. All those things take time though, right? But I think that is the point where most people are like, well, I'll just get a part-time job. I'll do this. I'll get another thing. And that can be really great. Like, right, we both have part-time jobs that we do, but it's so important to not what's the expression? Like let yourself fall between two stools. I don't know if you've ever heard that. And so it's basically saying that like you're not putting enough effort in to get on top of either stool. So you're not putting enough effort in at your job. Your job isn't what you want to be doing. So it's just this mundane thing, but it's also taking away from the time that you would be putting into your business. So I think that's really important to think about when you're like, okay, I have a ton of debt. Realize, figure out, look at your numbers, use that service. I think that sounds great, the calculator, and figure out how long do you have before you really need a steady income. Because for me, I was just like, oh, it's like loose, it's open-ended, oh, flowy, whatever. And then all of a sudden, like reality really hit. And I was like, wow, I really need an income like right now. Savings are being depleted, whatever. And so figuring out like, okay, I have 6 months that, I have a shit ton of debt. No kids are listening, right? I was like, I have a ton of debt but I can make do for the next 3 months. Okay. And then planning it out that way where you can, that there's an end date. And I think if you're in the field that you really want to be in and you have that hunger and you have like a date and you have actionable steps, it's completely doable to turn that around and to be really making steady income. It's just how hungry are you, how much time are you really able to put in? So if you are having a part-time job, realizing, okay, I can put in 2 hours of work a day, figuring out what will equate to. But I guess for like a first step, I'm just kind of rambling. I don't really, I think I know what did I do? Well, you guys, what did you guys, when you started your businesses, what is it that like?
Something that has really helped me, and it's just been recently, is I listened to this book by Jen Sincero, and it's You're a Badass with Money. And actually doing the worksheets and figuring out, like, okay, why am I self-sabotaging myself? And why am I not, bringing in the income potential that I can do? And actually, like having those conversations with myself and being like, okay, like she had a perfect example that, she was self-sabotaging herself because her dad always gave her money. And in her mind, like, like way deep back in there, she was thinking, okay, if I don't have to ask my dad for money anymore, he's going to think I don't love him. And that's going to break his heart when in fact, it wasn't going to. But she had been self-sabotaging herself for years because of this limiting belief.
Totally reminds me of there's I don't remember what it's called. It's like the money roller coaster, maybe. That sounds kind of correct. But it's exactly that, where like especially like in our field, we'll make a certain amount of money and then we kind of reach that limit. So like for me, it was around $2,000 a month, and I was like, I know I can make more than $2,000 a month, but I was just always stuck at this level. And then it was like whenever I got close to like getting up to like $5,000, I would sabotage myself back down because I was just like, who am I to like be getting $5,000 a month? Like, what did I do? What am I really doing? And so it was like you said, figuring out what are my limiting beliefs on why I don't think that I can earn $5,000 a month. Oh, it's because like being around all these entrepreneurs all the time and them always talking about how hard it was to make money. I was like, this isn't hard enough. I'm not miserable enough. This isn't stressful enough for me to justify having this sort of income. And it's like, yeah, I bet if you look up like money roller coaster there, it just shows that you will always get yourself back down to that level. You work yourself up, you get yourself back down. And it's just such a cycle that it's so important to, I didn't read the You're a Badass with Money, but I read You're a Badass, and that was an awesome one too. And figuring out what it is that has caused you, to really think of yourself as like, what dollar amount do you assign to yourself and why? How are you showing up in your relationship with money? I think is a great question to ask yourself.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And I think it's definitely about mindset too. When you make those goals, and that's also just a whole nother topic, is goal setting, how it's so important every single week, every single month, just really focusing on that number and what you want to do. But, kind of like what you were saying, when you get to a certain point and you're actually there and you're like, wow, I'm making X goal money that I wanted to be doing. This is awesome. And then it's like finding those limitations that would make you have those setbacks. You know, I guess it's about changing your mindset to where when you get to that upper limit, somewhere you've never been before, it's about becoming really comfortable and pushing forward, and you know, you keep improving and you keep going in the right direction versus like getting to an uncomfortable zone and then going back down to somewhere where you're comfortable, so to speak. So
well, Marissa, I know that we could chat forever because we do quite frequently, but we will wrap this up today. So thank you again for being on the show. Let our listeners know where they can find you.
I'm on Instagram. It's at Marissa Woodman, Marissa Wodman, if you need that. And Facebook, not as active on Facebook, should be. But yeah, Instagram. Find me on Instagram. I'll follow. Let's be friends.
She shows lots of cute pictures of her dog, Jeffrey.
oh,
Who is adorable. And she makes really, really good food, you guys. So go follow her.
that's awesome. Well, thank you for so much for being on the show, Marissa. This was delightful. Appreciate all the knowledge and time.